Hey everyone. Hey everyone, this is Mary Despe, your host for the final online webinar in the 9 to 5 Makeover Meetup series. And today we are going to cover resume basics. This is really a helpful to-do list and things that you should keep in mind before you actually start the revamp and rewrite of your resume. So let's jump in. Okay. So we're going to take a look real quick at what we'll cover in today's presentation. We're going to take a look at two questions that are really important, especially in today's age. What is a resume and why is it important to the job search? We might think we know the answers to this, and we probably do, but it's helpful to take in mind other things in today's dynamic. So we'll cover that. Also, we're going to take a look at a few different samples of resumes, the chronological and functional resume types, and determining which one is right for you. Next, we will take a look specifically at things that will make your resume really effective, really stand out from the crowd. Not just good, but these are key areas that will help you set yourself apart and show that you're a great candidate. And then lastly, we will talk about some resources that are available to you. Many of them are free if you are planning to rewrite your resume. Okay, so let's just jump in. So real quick, again, my name's Mary Despe. I'm the owner and recruiter of MK Despe Consulting, based here on the beautiful island of Oahu. I've had the good fortune of recruiting for different companies worldwide, and I just like sharing information between job seekers and companies, but really the job seekers in this case, because I've hired for so many different companies, have a good understanding of the things that hiring managers consider when they're picking the person they want to have in a particular role. So, okay, let's just jump right in. So we talked about these two questions. What is a resume and why is a resume important for job seekers? So these are really important questions. I think if you're like many people, you've probably heard at some point in your life that the resume is an essential tool to get a job. Like in many cases, you won't be able to be considered unless you have this document. And sure, there are exceptions and some places that only focus on, say, like an application, but as you progress into the professional ranks, as your career goes on, a resume is essential. But beyond it just being essential to be considered, there are a few considerations that just want to remind people of. So what is a resume? It's important to remember while it is an essential document, it's actually a specialized marketing tool for you. It should show anyway, your qualification and your suitability for a position. So when you keep that in mind, yeah, it's a marketing document. It needs to show your work experience, other kinds of historical information, such as where you attended school, any educational accomplishments, skills, other things. And this is where the resumes get a little tricky, right? Not only is it a marketing document for you, it should communicate experiences in a way that shows that your background is relevant to the role that you're applying for. So why is a resume important for job seekers? So this is something that I think people forget when they're rewriting or trying to redo their information. The resume communicates how you want to be portrayed to anyone who's reading your resume. So there's a lot of creativity, but there's also ownership in how you want to present yourself. So with that in mind, you have to think, anyone reading this document needs to get a good sense of what they want to see me as and how I want to be portrayed. So it's, as we mentioned, a standard document in the hiring process, yes, but it needs to tell your story. Because if you remember, in many cases when people apply to positions, the thing that's going to get them a call back from a company is that the resume is on point. It meaning it is very good, it is directly relevant for the role, it's probably a bit impressive. You know, it's something that stands out and says, wow, okay, I do want to speak with this person. He or she could be really good for this role. I think we get lost in it just being a standard document that like it will get you in the door and hopefully that's good enough because you meet the qualifications, but no, really it's about upping your game to the next level. You want something that's authentic and speaks to you and your experience and how you're different, but also relevant for the roles that you're applying to. So when we talk about resumes in this presentation, it's going to focus on resumes used for the private sector in the United States or the nonprofit sector. I know that there are other kinds of resumes available, such as academia focused ones and ones specific to the government, for example. But really we're going to focus on the most common formats found for the private sector. And what you'll find is that there's really just about two that are very popular in the job market, and that's the chronological resume versus the functional resume. So you might wonder, okay, so which one is right for me? We're going to cover both of these real quick. Okay, so chronological resumes. They're actually the most popular format for job seekers in the United States because they organize work history by chronology. That is, they start with your most recent work experience and then back it up historically. And this is a format that people are very familiar with, you know, and I say this because recruiters read the resumes and they, you know, I have an easy understanding and quick view of the experience, and you know their mind gets into this organization's style. So let's take a look at an example of this. Okay, so we're going to take a look at a chronological resume. And while this is a candidate's resume, you know, this person, Kara Candidate, is not real. I changed a lot of the information so you wouldn't know who this person is. So for the most part, this resume is in a chronological format. And what makes it so is that you see the work experience section right here in the middle of the page is organized by that series of dates. So you see she's still working at the high-performing real estate organization. You also get sense of when she started working there, basically since 2012, and what her role has been. And then underneath that, under that specific experience, you see her accomplishments. And in some cases, people put what their duties are, but it should be a balance of all of those. So she's listed quite a bit. And then if you go further down, you see prior to working at the real estate organization, she worked in other locations. And in 2010, she worked at a nonprofit in Chicago for a year. And then prior to that, it looks like 3 years in Los Angeles for a consumer products company. Same idea, you get a sense of the company, what at least, you know, in here, a description of the company instead of the title, but then also the title of the position that she worked in and what she did. So the other sections, as you can see, if we scroll back up, it starts off with key strengths and then it lists education. And then if you scroll down after work experience, skills and awards. I often get questions from people, is there a specific order that these sections have to show up in on a resume? The answer is not so much. I mean, certainly we'll give guidance on it, but it really depends on how you wish to organize your information. I would say it's a little weird if you start your resume with all your work experience. Typically, instead of key strengths, we see people write a summary statement or a professional objective of some sort, something like that, just a statement about themselves, what they're looking for and what their skills are. You know, education sometimes appears right near the top or at the bottom. I know in general, a lot of candidates who have been in the workforce for a number of years, if the work experience is really where they're showcasing, you know, their accomplishments and what they're capable of, education sometimes goes towards the bottom. But honestly, it really doesn't make or break the resume. And skills and awards, very important. You know, I think skills and what you're proficient with in terms of technology, or if it's another language, that's always important to have, as well as any awards, just to see that you go above and beyond and have been recognized for outstanding performance. So this is, in essence, what a chronological resume looks like. So let's go back to the presentation. Okay, so by contrast, functional resumes, you know, they organize information by your capabilities or your domain of experience, and they don't really focus on chronological dates. This is a format that's used when there are unique situations. You know, there might be situations where a candidate has some breaks in employment history for various reasons. Perhaps they were taking care of a family member, or they took a sabbatical, or, you know, they were unemployed, whatever the case might be. You also see a functional resume format in the situation where maybe a person has diverse experience and expertise. It doesn't necessarily flow in one area, but maybe multiple areas. And then also, you know, we see functional resumes in situations where, you know, a person may not have a lot of hands-on direct experience in a particular subject matter. So we'll see this in a moment with an example, but an example of the lack of experience, you know, especially when you're starting out, graduating school or in between school or what have you, you can see functional resume types pretty commonly. So let's take a look at that example. And this example I found off themuse.com, which is a great career website. So here we go. So this is an example of a functional resume, and it's for a candidate by the name of Tanya Black. So you see, just by looking at it, it looks like it could be a chronological resume because it's set up similarly like the other one we looked at. But as you see, in this case, her starting point begins with a summary instead of key skills or key strengths like the other one did. But then what you see next is that she highlights her areas of expertise. So she has created 3 areas of expertise. So one would be reception and customer service, the next is scheduling and meeting coordination, and the last is administrative support. And then within these domains of expertise, she lists what accomplishments or things that she has done in these key areas. So you get a sense of the volume of customers that she's worked with, you know, how many inbound phone calls she's taken, etc. You see it as you go down, you know, in the different areas, which, you know, it's really good here. You know, she's actually assisted planning fundraising events each quarter for a good size number of people, 300 attendees. And then administrative support, as you can see. What's by contrast here in a functional resume, you see that the next section below is work experience. And similar to the chronological resume, she lists the title, the organization, the dates of employment. And the difference, though, is that her accomplishments aren't listed under the work experience, but rather under the expertise section above. So this is important because you don't necessarily know where she, answered up to 50 incoming calls a day. You don't know where. So it could be at any of these. And this is important because you might think, well, what's the big deal if you have it set up this way? It's strategic in the sense that a lot of employers are looking for current skill base. So if I need to know that you can handle a lot of inbound calls and a lot of client contact and customer contact without, missing anything, I'd be more assured of it if you did that recently versus, say, 5 to 10 years ago. So it's really helpful in the chronological sense of a resume to know when you did those things. And a chronological resume spells it out for you, ideally. However, functional resumes, you kind of skillfully show that you've done the work and you have the expertise, but the dates, it's not as obvious. Perhaps that's something you did a while back and not recently, but you can do it, but that how current your skill base is and exercising that kind of skill might be a bit dated. So it's a helpful and skillful use of the skills and putting it into a good format. But recruiters will probably ask more questions, wondering where you did certain things with what group and that sort of thing. So just be aware of that. I think Tanya Black, the candidate here, does a good job of organizing her resume succinctly, but I know that for myself, I would probably ask a lot of questions about where she accomplished certain things, so I could get an understanding of how recent and current her skill base and knowledge base is. Okay, so I did mention those two resume formats, but we're actually going to just jump into a third. And this is a really common example. It's a hybrid approach of the two resume types. So it's a chrono functional resume. So I will show you what an example of that might be. Some of you might actually have it. Again, this is for a candidate that's not really real. It's Jenna candidate. She starts out with a professional objective summary. You see what she has to say about herself, what she's looking for, what she feels, she excels in. Now you see she jumps right into the professional experience and she takes a page out of both of the resume format types. She talks about the company right here, obviously doctored up and changed, XYZ government agency, and her title, and then the dates of employment. And then underneath, you get a sense of the duties and responsibilities she did. So you have, provide consultation, and then you'll see here she went the extra mile to kind of organize these different activities into bigger buckets of function. So organizing lead, project and event management, communications, and you see the sub-activities listed under that. Same on down the line. We won't look at every single thing here, but technology startup, same sort of thing, financial services, and then towards the bottom, she lists all of her education, and I believe that's it. Yes. So that's just another look at the format, which is a bit of a hybrid approach to the two. So I know that people have asked me, so is this a better approach, having a hybrid of the two? To be quite honest, it's really going to be up to you, how you want to organize your experience. I think it's good in the sense that it's clear, like you see the chronological organization, and that's something that a lot of people are familiar with. And then you can see some of the key expertise areas that she exercised in each of the roles. My biggest criticism of this resume right now is not so much how she's organized it, but rather what she's written in it, because it just reads as like a laundry list of responsibilities and things to check off a checklist and nothing of outstanding accomplishment. And it's interesting because it looks like a great resume, but it's not, in my opinion. I mean, it's okay. She would need to work on it a little bit. But this is what a chronological functional resume would look like. I think it works in some cases. It makes the organization look, your history look more clear and, to the eye. And people can understand from an overall expertise area what you consider your strengths to be in when you're looking at it, yet at the same time have good understanding of when you did those things. Okay, so now that we've looked at those different resume formats, just want to talk about some of the basic rules to keep in mind before you start writing or rewriting. So in terms of how long the resume should be, you should think it in this general rule. The more concise the resume, the better. I'm not saying that it has to be 1 page or a maximum of 2 pages, but as many pages you can put your experience in and capture it really well, the better. I know that there are some job seekers who have worked over 20 years, like myself, and to be quite honest, if you looked at my work history, I probably would have a resume of over 5 pages. I've compressed it at some point in time to about 3, just about 3. So, there's no hard and fast rule except the shorter, the better, but it needs to be accurate and reflective of how you want to present yourself and experience. So we say this, 1 page ideally, 2 to 3 pages for experienced people. But again, it's not a hard and fast rule. So for experienced job seekers, these kind of things are really important, in terms of not just how many pages, but just a good revisiting of rules. So the actual look of a resume should be visually clean. So that would mean there's a good balance of white space. It doesn't look too busy. So if you're in a creative or a design field, you should have more of a conservative look to your resume, in my opinion. You don't want to have too many colors or too many fonts used. The fewer the better. I would say maybe 1 to 2 at most is the best. Same thing with the font type and styles. I mean, I would say 3 is okay, but you certainly don't want to get it where every single section is something new for the font or the colors. And always use correct spelling and grammar. People in today's day and age, they abbreviate or use acronyms quite a bit and they don't explain it. You certainly want to explain acronyms that you're using because the other person on the reading side of the resume will not always understand what you're trying to communicate. And then in general, what you're putting into your resume should really demonstrate your best accomplishments, skills, and experience. It's not a laundry list of what you did on the job. And we'll get into that in a little bit better. But these are really good basic rules to have when writing and laying out the resume. So people ask, what are the basic sections that I should include? So we're just going to cover all of these things. I'm going to put these up right now for you. Okay, and I went too far. Okay, so, obviously you'll want to start with your name at the top of your resume. So people ask, oh, so for my contact information, should I put everything like my address and phone numbers and everything? And I would actually say, no, you shouldn't put your address in today's day and age just because it's out there and people have access to information. So you can put location as far as city and state. And then beyond that, you could also include, say, your phone number where you're reachable, as well as a mail an email address. Many websites now that are job search portals hide those things until a certain point in the review process to say the employer. And it's really to help with your security and privacy. So I would recommend that when you're putting your address, give as little information as possible. If you are trying to find a job in another location and you don't live there, I would certainly put the location that you want to be in, but address your current situation in a cover letter and every time that you speak with somebody, okay? Contact information can also include your URL to a personal website or your LinkedIn profile or a portfolio if you're in design of your work. So I think those are all great things to put in contact. Also, the next section, typically at the start of the resume after your name and contact, you should have some sort of professional statement, be it an objective or a summary of your background and what you're looking for and what you bring to the table. It should not be more than, say, 3 sentences. The shorter, the better. But you want to keep it concise, okay? But you're essentially giving the high-level, quick elevator pitch of what your professional persona is and what you want to be looking for and that sort of thing. Now, these next 2 sections, the education and the work experience, as I mentioned earlier, they can go in reverse order, really. I think when you find people who are new to the workforce, they put their education or certifications up there earlier in the resume, and that's fine. But as you progress, it is also fine to put work experience before that education line. And it's just because it's going to showcase what your body of experience comes from and where it comes from. So it doesn't make or break a situation, as I mentioned, but you do need to include both of these sections in there. It doesn't necessarily matter which comes first. One section you definitely need to have are skills or proficiencies. And nowadays you see a lot of emphasis around technical skills, language skills, other special kinds of skills that don't fall into either of those categories. So some of these things include under the technical realm, you're proficient in Microsoft Word, you have a mastery level of report writing and you utilize an advanced level of the report writer and business intelligence software, Tableau, or BI Power Tools or something like that. So Microsoft Office, proficient in Excel with pivot tables and VLOOKUPs and macros. I mean, you want to capture these things in the way that you see fit. Languages, if you're fluent in conversation, and or you can write at a level that's higher than, I would say, beginner, put it down. Know that if you do put your language down there, that you are listing it as a skill, it's fair game to be interviewed or tested in that particular language. So for myself, for example, I would never say that I'm fluent in Spanish, never. But, I would say I'm probably intermediate conversation in Spanish, but I can read Spanish language a lot better than I can converse. So I typically write that I'm proficient in reading Spanish, but never conversant. So it's really up to you what you're comfortable with. Other skills might be that, you are a licensed facilitator in a particular conflict resolution, methodology, or perhaps you're a project management professional, PMP certified, and that you've received, a lot of experience and things like that. Also, maybe you are a quality professional, and that you're Lean Six Sigma Black Belt certified at the master level. These are things you want to include under skills, okay? Now, awards, community leadership volunteer, these are all really helpful because they speak to things outside of the workplace in many cases. And they're going to talk about, really examples where you go the extra mile. So you want to make it relevant, you want to make it interesting. It's really going to be up to you. So I know I've seen everything from, people had won scholarships to their undergraduate. It's a 4-year full ride scholarship. Other people have put down that they worked full-time while attending school full-time, which I think is amazing. They put that kind of under this category and just listed it as accomplishments or something to that nature. So really think about it. And again, you want to think in the spirit that this resume is portraying how you want to be seen. So choose those awards, community events and examples to be specific and helpful to you. Okay, so as we embark on the resume and what to put into it, it really truly is the hard part of this whole exercise. So before you actually start jumping into writing the resume, because it's such a daunting task, I know many of us just want to get it over with, it's a good idea to get a refresher on some helpful tips as you write your resume. So I always tell people they should start with 2 questions in mind. Before they start writing their resume, you want to say, does my resume as it exists right now, does it say what I want it to say about me as a candidate for the role I'd like to have? And does my resume show that I have the experience, skills, background that make me a compelling choice for the role I'd like to have? And with that in mind, compelling choices that they're reading the resume and thinking like, dang, I really need to talk to this person because she is outstanding or she has direct knowledge of the market or, particular background and experience for this role. A lot of times people just stick with the basic qualifications and say, oh, I met the qualifications and that's it. But you really want to up-level what you're trying to accomplish and focus on presenting yourself as like the top candidate or among the top candidates to choose from. So in addition to this, before you actually start writing, you should get someone else to read and review your resume and listen to their feedback. You really want to get an understanding from their point of view, like what is your street credibility? And what do I mean by that? If someone were to look at your resume, what would they say that you're an authority in? And do you think your friend or your person reviewing the resume who knows you would agree with that? Also too, you need to do some reflection on your own. Like, what do you think you are really good at? And does your resume say that about you? And then have that asked and challenged by whoever is reading your resume. And it's helpful because others can give you the feedback that maybe you don't necessarily see. They could probably give you pointers on areas that you might have not really considered for yourself and you underplayed. So just be open and honest to accepting the feedback. One thing that you want to have a good sense of is where do you really stand out? Not just do well or minimally or, satisfactorily. What do you believe are your key strengths? Like truly, if you could just name 1 or 2 things that you did really well, like extremely well, better than other people, what is it? And then ask your friend or the person reviewing your information, a colleague or supervisor, what they think it is. And incorporate that into your notes as you're planning for your resume, because that becomes part of the persona and the story that you're trying to tell. And then another key thing is, beyond just knowing what you are skilled in and your strengths, when you're considering applying to the roles that you'd like to be in, you need to know, are your skills in demand for the role? Or do you have just general skills that may not be really requested by the position that you're looking to be in? You want to understand this because this is another area where people don't take time to really assess their skills and experience. They think just because they got a degree in marketing that that's good enough, but really a lot of it today depends on specific skills and the experience and what's being used in the market today. I know that on occasion, I'll get people who say that they're really good at spreadsheets and all of that stuff, but then the spreadsheets that they list, you know, are not, say, Microsoft Excel, but rather Lotus 1-2-3. And it's like, okay, well, I know that Lotus 1-2-3 is an extremely dated program from like the 80s. So that's not really in demand, and it doesn't sell your case that you're a spreadsheet expert. So be aware of what these in-demand skills are and take stock of it and know what the roles that you want to go into are looking for and see where you match up, because it's just helpful to know as you're creating your resume and what you'll need to include if you have that. Okay, so I think we've said this before. Please don't copy and paste the job description into your resume. I know it saves a lot of time, but it does not do justice to you and what you bring to the table. So you want to provide a balance of what you did in the role, but you also want to share what you accomplished or outstanding recognition for your contributions because of you. You've seen some of the resume examples earlier in the presentation. You don't want that laundry list of things that you did because it just shows that you can follow and perform a laundry list of rote activities that are standard. You want to show that yes, you can do some key functions, but you also bring a lot more. So with that, you probably don't want to have more than, 5 to 6 bullet points, but you want a good balance of responsibilities and events and accomplishments. So you also want to be very clear in describing your contributions, not the team's necessarily, but your contributions towards an improvement or, an outstanding performance. I would say, a lot of people put improvements like process improvements, increasing, the output or efficiency of something. And sometimes people say, oh, we increase the efficiency by 3%, which generally speaking, it doesn't sound like that is much of an improvement. So if you're going to include improvements, you should be able to document and talk about improvements of at least 10%, okay? And that's going to vary by industry. What does that mean? But something that looks tangible and like it's an actual improvement to the department. Also, going back into the school realm, a lot of people talk about school and their grade point average, and they'll put it down with, their resume. I believe that really you should only write your GPA down if it's going to help you, if it shows that you were a really good student. I mean, technically for me personally, I really wouldn't want to see anything lower than a 3.0. I mean, honestly, I'd probably want to see something above a 3.0, not even a 3.0. But, I got a resume the other day. I actually get many of them still that say, oh, I got a 2.5 or a 2.6, and that doesn't really help. You could be attending the most difficult school in the world, and that's pretty good GPA if it's on a 4.0 scale, relatively speaking, but in a broader marketing sense, 2.6, 2.7 doesn't look very impressive. So don't write it down, just say that you attended school or achieved a bachelor's degree or whatever the case might be. And then, what you might want to put here is any accomplishments in your resume that might be different from what your colleagues or people in your work group might show on theirs. So an example of this is, maybe you sit on a sales team of like 5 or 6 people and you won an award for Rookie of the Year. and you were able to maintain 100% of quota or exceed that for 6 or 7 quarters in a row, something like that. You want to write that stuff down in your resume, or at least capture it, because not everyone is going to have that. A lot of people might have sales, account executive, or inside sales, and you're part of a team. But if you are standing out from your peers that show that you give a lot more and that you've performed a lot better, note that. So you want to start thinking of things that you've accomplished, and really they express an improvement, a marked change, something that is a function of being a high performer. And then lastly, if you've been in the work market for a while, just go back 10 years on your resume. And with this, if you have experience that's beyond 10 years that you feel is relevant, you can just summarize that with a simple sentence saying work experience, prior to such and such year, available upon request, if you feel like you need to put that. But a lot of times you can just go back 10 years and that's fine. And then if it comes up in conversation, what you did before then you can have that over the phone with the recruiter or in the interview with the hiring manager. So other things to keep in mind when you're writing your resume, you want to make sure before you get started, you want to make sure that the resume language takes a very active tone. So you want to use very good descriptive action verbs, descriptive activities. So if you remember that chronological hybrid resume that we talked about, chronological functional hybrid, I should say, it was okay because it had examples of manage this, oversaw that, processed payroll. I mean, that's fine. It's okay. It doesn't really get me excited. You want to use language that gets you excited or makes a person sit up in their turn like, oh, that's really great. So, if you led a team, yeah, definitely use the word led. But maybe you could say you spearheaded a project, which sounds pretty interesting, or something that was more active. And there are a lot of resources online that share that kind of spirit. I would just say try to make the resume language as it relates to active language and descriptive activities. It's a balance. It's going to be part of the standard language of leading a team and so forth, but also keep in mind some words that are very descriptive and evoke kind of excitement and interest in what your background is. Even if you may not necessarily use it in everyday language, it'll be helpful to put that into your resume. Also, in the resume, this is something that I feel like it needs to be stated, but people often put all sorts of experience that they've had in their resume, like maybe every single job that they've held since they were age 16, or experiences that have nothing to do with the type of role that you want right now. And really, your experiences should focus on the types of things that you've done in your life that will get you hired for the role. So personally speaking, if you are looking to be a data analyst or a marketing analyst, you want to include activities that support you being a really competent and great data or marketing analyst. You don't necessarily want to say that you were a Subway sandwich maker, for a week. I mean, you can if you can include that though, if say that was your way to support yourself for 4 years as you were working full-time or working part-time and paying your own college tuition, that's pretty interesting and outstanding. But I would say, you really want to align the activities and the experiences that state the case for you being hired for a particular role. You want to also share the experiences that show that you have the core skills and the specific expertise valued by the position. think we've already suggested that. And then also, one thing you want to keep in mind after you start writing and getting the feedback from other people, you want to read it to see if how the resume reads suggests that there's a career progression that leads you to the role that you want. So there's a few things on this. So, you know, it needs to read like everything that you've done, it makes sense that you're applying for this specific role and that you're ready for it. It's not so much ideal if you have a resume and your career progression and how it reads on paper shows that you've done this role 3 or 4 times already. This is a big one. So, you know, keep this in mind, especially if you're a job seeker that has been in the market for a bit. You know, a lot of employers don't like to see that because they think, oh, this person's going to be bored if she's doing the analyst job, you know, for a 4th time. You really need to show movement, upward mobility, and your career progression needs to speak to that. So keep it in mind. These are all things that you need to consider. If you're wondering, how do I do that? We'll talk about how some sources and resources that you can utilize to help you pinpoint, you know, this type of language and expression within the resume in a moment. So another key thing to bring up here is that the skills, software, experiences that are utilized by your industry and the role that you're in, you need to incorporate that within the language of your resume. And not only does it show that you're current in these kind of things that are used by your peers professionally, but also, you know, the software that sits behind your job applications are heavily dependent upon algorithms that rank by words and terms that you're utilizing in your resume. So, you know, in the 90s, it was all about buzzwords like, oh, if I'm a Java software developer, I'm going to put Java in there everywhere. It's sort of like that, but at the same time, you know, it's a bit nuanced now. You know, they want to see phrasing, experiences that capture that you are actively engaging in these skills and software that are used by your profession. So it should be not just in skills and keywords, but also within the body of your resume content. And the reason is that there are algorithms that drive these applicant tracking systems and job sites that analyze information and rank whether or not you meet the experiences and the profile based off of the skills and experiences, you know, for what they're looking for. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to be considered, but a lot of these tools do look and, you know, say these people are a very close match to what you're looking for, and then so on down the line, that like there are people mid-list that are okay matches, but they're not that great. So you really want to make some awareness and have a keen mind to that, because a lot, you know, people tend to focus at who's at the top of the list. So just so you know, so if you are trying to think about how to customize the words within your resume, these are things that you need to be aware of, okay? Because it's not just a recruiter on the opposite side looking at every single resume, not at all. They're gonna probably spend time on the top 10, 15 maybe. So you wanna keep that in mind. Okay, so we talk about these areas that are honestly really difficult. You know, and you might think, gosh, I need help with my resume. And there are a number of free resources out there. I've mentioned a few of them already. You know, there's a great career website called themuse.com. There's a wonderful career coach and resume coach named Linda Rainier, and she has a website, lindarainier.com. Careerism is another. And then of course, my YouTube channel, MK Despay Consulting, you can go online on YouTube and subscribe. We do try to put videos often about anything career related. So these are all free. Also, you know, you don't have to go online to look for these things. Asking and engaging friends and family with professional backgrounds, maybe even similar to yours, are good starts too to get the feedback and their take on what your resume looks like. Career services counselors at schools too are helpful. Although, I mean, I think it's, you know, they do provide the really good basic functions of how to do well and how to present resumes. Some of the tips of industry, though, and what you need to do to get ahead may not necessarily be current, but they, you know, regardless, are outstanding resources to get a good, solid understanding and feedback on how your resume reads. And then lastly, you can always get a free resume review from a professional resume writer at topresume.com. And you can do it by one of two ways. You can actually go to my website, marydespe.com, and subscribe, or, you know, leave a comment, or you could just go to my YouTube channel and leave a comment on this video, because I'm going to post this presentation, and, you know, hopefully people will see it and use it as a resource. And if you want to get a free resume review from topresume.com, put that comment in there and I'll be able to shoot you the information on where you can do that. And they'll give you some tips. These people are pros at what they do. They've written hundreds of thousands of resumes for all sorts of industries, so it's good to get the feedback. And then also, when you come to my website, marydespe.com or mkdespeconsulting.com, you can always go to my shop, and if you want one-on-one help with me, there's information in the shop on that. But with that, I want to thank you so much for being a part of the online webinar series. Certainly encourage you to stay in touch, and these are the different ways that you can do it. Feel free to drop me a line on any of the social platforms or in any of these methods, and I'd be happy to get back with you within a day or so. All right. Well, thank you so much, and I wish you well, and I can't wait to hear about how your job search and your 9-to-5 makeover journey is going to be. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.